let's just chat about branding and things like that. So if
So
anyone
what
else
do you
turns
think
up,
about King
I'll let them
Charles'
in.
new logo?
Well, I've got to say the what do they call it? The
Cipher,
sign, the
Royal
seal,
Cipher, isn't it? He's
cipher, the royal
King
Royal
Charles
cipher.
Cipher.
Cypher.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was very good. I've got to say. I mean, I know you've only got to combine two letters and one number, but why couldn't they have just followed, like, E to R made sense and C to R? I don't know why they've tried to kind of hook it all together into something that just looks. I think they wanted to maybe fit it in a circle. Was the only thing that I was thinking.
Uh,
So as an icon on Instagram, which I don't think he'll have, it
But
might look better.
he has quite a hand in it though. Apparently,
Apparently so. Yeah. Yeah.
and that seems quite fitting in some respects because I only saw it for a few seconds, but to me it looked kind of spectacularly tasteless in comparison to the Queen's. Because there was a certain element of modernism for the Queen, but Prince Charles is just, it's like he's got himself. I don't know. I dread that. Let's not go down.
I'm just thinking of all those post boxes, those pillar boxes. Are they going to change, or they won't change? They're just
no,
no. They're still. We've got one on our development that's still got King George VI.
Well, it's rather lovely. I think the little bit of history. I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's something like 30% of the phone box letter boxes out there are still with King George on it. So I guess
as high as that. I didn't realise it's that high.
Yeah, but also they probably won't be making a lot more post boxes and things like that anyway. So,
well, no.
There's one in Buckingham Palace, which I think they'll change fairly soon. There's also, I learned this week, there's a cash point in Buckingham Palace.
No way.
Yes, there is.
How do you use that?
Unless it's a photo me booth or something like that. But yeah, there's. Hi Margot, welcome to Brand Lab. Nice to have you here. If you want to come on video, you can, but if you don't, that's absolutely fine as well. So we were just chatting about royal ciphers.
Oh right, sorry, I'm going on to pillar boxes. My favourite pillar box, which I hope will survive, is one that is being gradually embraced by a plane tree, and the plane tree is growing round it, and the pillar box is still working, but it's kind of almost swallowed up. It's quite extraordinary.
And do you think I'll just let it keep on growing around it then? Is that the idea?
Yep.
Yeah. It sounds very good. So, well, welcome everyone to Brand Lab. I'll just do the short introduction. It's good to have you here, and I think a few of you have been before. At least three of you have been before. So welcome back. So Brand Lab is just a little kind of get together that I created earlier on this year. Just chat about things branding, and I think I've mentioned this in many times, is that because branding is quite complicated, or there's lots of different facets to it, I think it's good to sort of drill into different parts of it and talk about it in different ways. And so I'm always trying to demystify that process a little bit. And I think everyone in here, whilst some people work in marketing and branding, we are all brand owners, and we can sort of work this out a little bit for ourselves with the right kind of navigation. So that's what I'm doing really, is helping people untangle any issues about branding. We could help Prince Charles with his royal cipher if he'd have asked us, but he didn't. So that's a project that might need to be done another time. Many of you know that I've done big corporate branding projects, and as well as working with solo entrepreneurs and businesses. And I do lots of things from brand identity, brand messaging, but really sort of helping people understand what a brand is all about. And for me, it's about getting that emotional connection with a product or service so that you know that you made the right decision. Won't be too surprised to learn that I don't read the Telegraph, I read the Guardian. And I think that's the best sort of thing for me. And there's lots of things about that brand that I really, really love. But I feel that I've made the right choice when I wear Adidas as opposed to Nike and go to Costa, etc. And so always we're trying to get that emotional connection. So when people come across a brand and they understand a little bit more about who you are and they buy into you better. I think, sort of use this analogy as well as like, it's like a jigsaw puzzle without the picture sometimes, branding. So there are practical things we can do. which is all about kind of breaking it down in the different elements that make up a brand. And these are the areas that I focus on. I'm going to chat with Sam in a bit, who focuses on different parts of a different jigsaw maybe, but it's always kind of fitting those things together in the right logical sequence. Particularly, I focus a lot on the insight, which is about sort of thinking about, you know, competition and audience, the story, what you're selling, who you're selling it to, all those sort of things, the mission that you might have, the brand idea, central core. And then it's about engaging either verbally, words, or visually, pictures. And that's kind of where I stop. I don't do a lot of sort of implementation and things like that. So today, I'm going to give you an example of a job that I did with Sam. I don't know how long ago. Sam might remember, but I'm sure it was about
2014.
2014. So 8 years ago, we worked together, and you know, we went through my donut process. It existed even then. It probably didn't have a picture of a donut on it, but it was a similar thing to, you know, try and understand the vision, position, offer, values, and that glue that's in the centers. So I'm just going to introduce you to Sam. So Sam, welcome to Brand Lab. So I've known Sam, as I say, probably maybe since 8 or 9 years, when we worked together on a project for an organization called CARDA, which I'm going to go through, and then I've subsequently worked on other things. I think what's really enjoyable about working with Sam, who's strategic marketing, brand and communications expert, is the sort of overlap that you get when you work with clients, and the sort of shared knowledge and experience that you can develop things better together. So I know without doubt that the work that we did on CARDA was stronger because it was more like a relationship that was shared across the activities and things that we were doing, rather than that baton passing. So I'm going to stop the screen, and I think just let Sam introduce herself more properly.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all. Yes, I first came across Nigel when we were looking for a creative partner to help us implement a new brand, a new name for the organisation where I was head of marketing and communications at that time, which had the rather unfortunate name of Coordinated Action Against Domestic Abuse. So wasn't particularly catchy, and that was sort of shortened to an acronym of CAADA, CAADA. And also the organisation itself was a sort of second tier umbrella organisation. It supported the sector, it supported the organisations that directly provided support to domestic abuse victims. And as a result of that, we needed to try and convey this through the new brand. So I'm sure Nigel will walk you through that. But it's really lovely to meet you all. Yeah, I've sort of gone freelance since 2019. So that's my situation. Would be great to hear more about you.
Yeah, maybe we could just go quick around the room. There's 6 of us. If you want to just say hello and who you are to everyone, that'd be great. So maybe we'll go. I'll just do it in the order. Brian, hello. I know who you are, but does everyone else?
Probably not. Paul does, but yeah. I'm Brian Altimus. My company is Riverside Consulting. I'm a cybersecurity consultant, and met Nigel through the FSB, and Nigel is now a client. So I started my business in 2014 when I left KPMG, and yeah, decided to go independent. So became a contractor. Funnily enough, we mentioned IR35 at the start of the call. Became a contractor for 5 years, and then just before the pandemic, great timing, I decided to actually turn my business into a consultancy.
That's what I did as well. Great timing for me.
Well, now since I think we just decided March 23, IR35 is going again.
Indeed.
What is IR35? I've missed something.
IR35. Let Brian explain.
Go ahead. I'm fine. So it was trying to regulate. It was trying to regulate the contracting market, so that you so the contractors were actually working on a project by project basis rather than being in a company for 10 years as an employee.
Yeah.
And ripping off the tax system.
I see. So that they were trying to force people to become proper employees rather than say
they were trying to force people. They were trying to force the long-term contractors
Yeah.
to become employees. What it actually ended up doing was totally destroying the contracting market altogether, because companies panicked and said, rather than trying to work out who was an employee and who was a contractor, they just said everybody was on payroll.
Okay.
Rather than through limited company.
So it made it harder for independent people to work with organisations.
Yeah.
So do you want to introduce yourself as well, Paul? You're not an IR35 contracting designer, I can tell.
No. I'm just that. I'm a designer. I was working for a startup, tech startup, and it was long story short, you get forced into working for yourself, because of various reasons, and that was my reason. Was that the major investor in the tech startup came in one morning and said he decided to put his money elsewhere, and we closed down virtually overnight. And then I just set up on my own, working as a designer, working with some big corporate organizations, people at the NHS and some councils, working on branding and annual reports and web projects. Not so much the hardcore kind of back-end web projects, but the front-end design of websites, that kind of thing. And it's only really ever been me, essentially. I mean, I work with people on different projects. I find that quite interesting if you collaborate. If there's something that comes along and you feel that you can genuinely bring two different aspects to the party, work together, then I like doing those kinds of projects. But essentially, it's only ever been me running the company. And I've been doing it since, 2003. It's quite a while.
Oh, excellent. Well, welcome to Brand Lab. And then I think someone else disappeared, but hi, Susanna. Nice to see you again. Do you want to just
thank you, Nigel. I'm hoping to take advantage of the group because if you can see my label, it says editorial training and consultancy. Does that tell you what I do?
I think it gives me a good idea.
I have an awful feeling that it doesn't. So I'm thinking,
it says a lot without saying very much.
Well,
it's going in the right direction. So welcome. So yeah, I think what I'll do is I'm just going to go through the work that myself and Sam did together, and then we'll have a quick chat about it. So it's already mentioned CARDA, so Coordinated Action Against Domestic Abuse, and as Sam said, the thing with a brand, first of all, this is a second tier charity, so it wasn't like a frontline service like you might have heard of. Things like cancer research, but it was supporting a lot of charities that were working within domestic abuse. And it's a classic thing that the brand was, it's difficult. The name was difficult to say, spell, remember, all those things. But they had a clear ambition to want to be more well known because of the services they were providing are really, really important services. So this is how they looked, and this is how they sort of represented themselves. And it was a pitch actually, which we were unfortunately very, very fortunate to win. And with that, we were sort of maybe tasked with, I think the key things really was around the name and the visual identity. I think they had lots of ideas for how they might be able to get more engaged with people with the reports and things that they were writing, but actually it was falling apart in actually just not having a name that people could remember was probably the most significant. So I worked with them, and yeah, we went through exactly the same process that I do all the time now. It's just that this was in real life, doing workshops, kind of getting inspiration from different brands and things, coming up, really thinking about all the different elements of the donut, the vision, the values, the mission, the positioning, all these things, and trying to come up with a core. Now, obviously, because this was a large organization, That was done with teams of people, took quite a long time. I can't remember how long. Sam, can you remember how long it took? 6 months, maybe?
Actually, I think that we went through this part of it in about 4 months. We were quite quick.
About 4 months.
Yeah, we were quite fast.
I've done this part of the process. My slowest has been 18 months, but that's not because I'm slow. It's just that as organizations get bigger, things just take longer to get consensus. I also remember, particularly with this project, trying to distinguish between the vision, the mission, and the core being a real challenge.
It
but
was really
because
hard.
you've got a way of, but because we've got this way of actually bringing it together, it kept focus, and we kept sort of exploring that. So all the processes, getting that insight. Eventually, we did get to the kind of the story, the vision, transforming lives affected by domestic abuse, and all the things, solutions that transform the UK's response, collaboration, focus, evidence. So this is really sort of, that's right.
Are you sure? I don't want to spoil your flow.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you, when you differentiate, how would you differentiate things like the vision, the mission, the position, and the value?
Okay, so good question. So the vision is where you want to be, and the mission are the activities that you're really going to do to get there. So if the vision here is to transform lives, the mission, how we're going to do it, is through collaboration, focus, evidence, whereas values are the things that you believe in. So they're the things that steer you in your behaviors, being innovative, be rigorous, and they're slightly different from the activities. The position is how you relate yourself in relationship to really a lot of focus around your audience and the competition. So actually being known, so domestic abuse is in there, it's responding to domestic abuse, it's in the UK, they're creating solutions. So they're the sort of triggers for that sort of thing. And the offer is clearly offer. You should download my brand donut guide, Paul, because it gives you all the 6 questions to ask to help fill this in. The crucial thing there is that at the center is this sort of thing that actually becomes the brand core. Now, this may have changed since we did the branding work, but having a relentless focus on family safety. And Sam, I think at the time that was quite a shift for Safe Lives, was it? Well, as Carter as it was before we did the naming. Was that a big shift, do you think, or was that something that was underpinning a lot of this work?
I think with all of with this sort of approach, inevitably the brand core is looking to articulate something that sits at the heart of the organization. And so I think we always believed in that sort of statement. The organization was absolutely rigorous in its research and used a sort of very innovative checklist to identify the highest risk victims, which at the time was quite certainly, well, it was quite radical for the domestic abuse sector, which was very much a sector which was based on human rights. It was based on the feminists in the 70s and the refuge movement. And this was a slightly different approach. This was really about, trying to determine who was at the biggest risk based on evidence. And that could be the victim, but could also be the wider family, including children. And so it was their organization was a really different organization to other organizations working in the same sector. And this brand core really taps into that, I think. So it did a really good job of articulating what was the very purpose of the organization, which is exactly what it should do.
And I think also you start to then be able to create a differentiation between other organisations, say for instance Shelter, that are focusing, not Shelter, Refuge, that are focusing on a different area of what domestic abuse and the issues around it. And it's really important for a brand that you've got that clear differentiation. Certainly, whilst these organisations, you wouldn't say they're all competitors, they are trying to put a stake in the ground to help in the way that they can help. So it's very important that you do this process before you get involved in the creative. So this was kind of, as you say, four months of time before we started thinking about the verbal identity and the visual identity. I think someone might have their mic on. can be, anyway, not to worry, I'll talk over it. And then the next part is to think about the naming. So naming, I've talked about this quite a long time. It's quite a long process to get this name that's now going to be memorable, short, ownable. And this is just some of the things. And actually, when I was looking through my notes there, I couldn't actually find the presentation where we came up with the names with the actual final name that we went with, which was Safe Lives.
I
But
just
you can sort of
say
see how
that name came from my boyfriend at the time.
did it come from your boyfriend at the time?
It
Well, there
came,
you go.
yeah,
Always involve your partners.
it came from my boyfriend at the time. And
So
yeah,
we'd got close, but no gold star.
And I remember we all struggled with, because we knew we wanted to focus on the outcome, but we struggled with the term safer lives, didn't we? And then it got whittled down to Safe Lives. Yeah.
But for the first round, we were really looking at the outcome around ending domestic abuse, which is a really strong, powerful statement of intent. And a couple of those sort of made it towards the end. So ending domestic abuse actually became a tagline that we used. But yeah, so I'm pleased that you've cleared that up, because I was thinking I can't actually find when we actually got rid of the R and the and put the safe got rid of the R basically. So anyway, we went through a whole naming process, and we wouldn't have got to that name without Sam's boyfriend at the time, but more crucially, without the sort of strong brand model that we put together.
I wouldn't give him too much
then
credence, to be honest with you.
Well,
I went home and had a conversation with him. I said, I think we need to focus on outcomes. And then he said, how about Safer Lives? And then that was that.
Yeah. And then we went into the visual concepts, which is the sort of typical thing where you start to try and bring it to life. We'd still actually kept on the table that they may not change the name. There might just be a new visual identity. But clearly we went forward with a new name and a new identity, and this is how it all came together. So Safe Lives, a positive image with a tick, ending domestic abuse, the clear sort of statement of what they were doing. And we didn't do a lot really, apart from just sort of refresh the colours a little bit, and they could still use a lot of the sort of material that they were creating and producing. And our role really ended with guidelines, a bit of a visual style for how the material comes together. And then the team went on, delivered it, and we did some videos. So, and I think Sam, if you could just let me just stop my screen. All right, my screen. You know, obviously, when you were working on the process, what would you say was the most difficult part of that process, going through from, if you can remember that far back?
I mean, I was actually talking about this with a colleague who's a very good friend of mine. Who is still a very good friend of mine, so an ex-colleague from CARDA, and we were sort of talking about, you know, the process at the time, and I think everybody found, you know, the point where we really had to agree the strategy. So absolutely deciding on the final vision, mission, offer, etc. There was a bit of debate about that, and oh, you are on mute, I think. Are you saying something?
It's okay. Just
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
but yeah, so getting agreement with everyone. And do you think the brand donut helped that process?
Yeah,
did
definitely.
Yeah,
absolutely, it really helped, and also having the right people in the room really helped. So we had, I think, pretty much all of SMT. I think we may have had one trustee. I can't really remember now, but we sort of didn't have too big a group, which I think really helped. And I think the other thing that was challenging, and it always is challenging, was the naming, because, you know, inevitably seeing names just on a blank piece of paper without the design behind it, it's really hard to sort of fall in love with any name, quite frankly. But it's a case of what name is going to convey particularly the sort of core purpose of the organisation. I think that's the approach we went with, wasn't it? Really effectively, and I think it still does that now. Yeah.
How was it internally when you first shared? I remember presenting to the trustees, but I think you would have been part of the unveiling it to the team. So the sort of jump from CARDA to Safe Lives, how did that go down?
If I remember correctly, people really liked it. So I think, you know, the tick on the logo relates back to the checklists that the organisation used to determine whether somebody is at high risk of harm or not. So it really related back to, you know, a very, very important part of the organisation, which colleagues were very, very bought into. And they really liked that. They really liked the clarity as well of the messaging with the strap line. They thought that was really useful. I think there was a bit of debate about the use of pink and blue, because we wanted to get across that actually the support that the charity was offering was actually also potentially available to male victims of domestic abuse as well as female, because obviously, you know, that is an issue. And so there was a sort of little bit of a debate about whether that was right or not, but actually, you know, it's a really engaging, warm and friendly visual identity that works really well when the topic itself is quite serious, and you know, what they offer is quite complex, and this helps to simplify, I think. So yeah, I think it went down really well. They loved it in the end, as far as I'm aware.
Excellent. Yeah, because what I remember was actually when you sort of shifted the focus from just what you might expect around domestic abuse and thinking about, you know, sometimes it's grandparents that are abused or teenagers that have been abused. We did a video with a young person that had been a victim, and just sort of seeing the different angles and open the conversation beyond what the expectation was really, really interesting. Has anyone got any questions about that project, or for Sam specifically about, you know, working with a mission-led business to try and shift opinion and, you know, change hearts and minds from
How when you went back to the team, because people are often quite wedded to traditional things that they've been doing for the last 5 years or whatever it is, did you feel like you had to win people over, or were they ready for change? Was it, you know, did you catch the wave kind of thing, or did you really have to work hard in winning people over?
Well, I mean, it was sort of quite some time ago, sort of 2014, 2015. And so I'm just sort of remembering back to then. But as far as I can remember, people were sold. I mean, we were also launching a new strategy, you know, new name. Everything was being launched at the same time. And it was a really exciting new direction for the charity. And the charity, prior to that, CARDA, the charity, was very, very well known and respected within domestic abuse circles, but everybody found it incredibly difficult to explain what the organisation was about to friends, to family, to members of the public. You know, it made fundraising quite limited in terms of the ability of them to have different approaches. Really quite challenging. It's not very public facing, CARDA. So this new approach opened up more avenues in that way. You know, it's probably made the brand much more sort of, in a sense, almost consumer focused. And
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there are some people that go through the when they change, there's a brand revision or whatever it is, and they refocus, and sometimes it feels completely pointless. But what's nice about your story is that there was obviously a very good reason. You know, there was a very practical reason behind the whole thing, and I think that can make sort of selling it a lot easier, because, you know, everyone can buy into the idea that everything about the brand, the change the brand, was for the better. You know, whether it's better for the people working within it, better about explanation, you know, the provision of information. And it's a very positive, everything about it has got a very positive kind of upbeat feel about it. And this, I guess it's not always the case, because sometimes change can be seen like for change's sake, like when they redesigned Gap, or, you know, the British Airways or whatever, you know, spectacular kind of disastrous changes.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think that has to be the way. I mean, rebrands are only going to work if there's a bigger purpose behind it. And, you know, absolutely, as Sam mentioned, the strategy, changing strategy is a reason to rebrand and represent to get people to look at you. I don't even know what was going on when the Gap logo changed that time for 24 hours before it changed back to what it was. But there was clearly a lack of focus. They were probably just thinking, we just need to do something different.
Yeah.
But that's clearly not the right idea. I think one of the other things that I remember from, so if the one of the ambitions for the project had been to increase visibility for Safe Lives, I think it was within the next 5 years, what was then the Duchess of Cornwall, but is now the Queen's Consort, became one of the sort of senior figures behind the charity. I don't know if she's going to still be involved, but attracting that level of engagement probably wouldn't have happened under the CARDA kind of proposition naming brand. So it was what you'd call a very good result. So you enjoyed the process then, Sam?
Could I just make a comment? I just so approve of going for safe lives rather than safer, because safe is absolute. And that is what you're aiming for. Safer,
exactly.
Yeah, it could be just a little bit less worse than it was. So it's not,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that was huge. I mean, getting rid of that R was really good.
It is really funny how when you're sort of going through the naming process, you can really agonize about certain things. So I think if I remember correctly, we were sat there going, Safe Lives, does that trip off the tongue? Do people say safe lives? The F and the V, do they sit well together? We really agonized over these things. And what's really funny is that like now everybody knows it's just Safe Lives and it's just been embedded and it's fine, and actually it works really well, and it's great. But it's quite funny remembering that, because I remember all of us were sat in the room going, does it work, or does that sound intuitive? Well, in the end, it was fine.
So Nigel, do you see it as your role to step in at those points and say, I think you're getting a little bit too introverted?
Yeah,
There's
two things that I would say about naming that I would always say is that be brave, because the usual becomes quickly forgotten where the unusual can get remembered. So if it's too safe, if it's too obvious, it just falls past people. The other thing is that you do have to sit with it for a while. So whenever I'm doing naming, I literally say, go and stick it on the fridge for a while. You can't just sort of come up with a name in 10 minutes and say that's the name. You probably do have to live with it, because this whole point, if you were thinking, of a famous drink brand, you wouldn't call it 3 Down, but everyone knows what 7 Up is, and it sort of just becomes acceptable. So if you don't do that sort of time of living with it, then you miss out on what might become a great name. So I think I was really proud of the Safe Lives work, and we won an award, didn't we, for it?
We won an award for the naming strategy, which I'm really happy.
Naming strategy,
which
was delightful.
And something else as well, which I can't remember now, but it was
called Creative Transform Award for Creative Strategy. So translating strategy into sort of a creative output. So it's great, Sam, for you to talk about that today. Thank you for coming along. I'm just going to go through a couple of more things, and everyone's more than welcome to jump in. And if there's any more questions for Sam around what she's doing, what she's up to, then please jump in. But I always sort of do a little section I call brand news. Brand news. So where's today's brand news? So obviously big in the news, and we mentioned some of it at the start, but I took a slightly different angle, is that we lost a public icon in the last 4 weeks, and major seismic event. And I was thinking about this, actually, thinking about pubs, and obviously the Queen, most famous woman in the world, as she was. But I sit in a pub called the Crown quite regularly, and it got me thinking about pub names, and would there be an impact on what people might call their names going forward. So I sit in a pub called the Crown, which is the second most it's second most name in the UK, behind the Red Lion. And I've noticed quite a lot recently about people renaming their pubs into sort of like trendy kind of names, and then going back to the more traditional sort of name. So I've kind of got this sort of eye on what might happen to the pub naming now that we've got a king. Will there be more King's Arms, or will there be less? Will the Queen's head disappear completely? I don't know what's going to happen. So kind of interested. I found this article where they were saying that words like inn and arms are really down in terms of what people are calling their pubs, as people trying to attract a younger, newer market using words like bar and tap to make these places kind of more appealing. So if anyone's got any point of view, here's the pub that I go to. It's called the Crown, and that's what I do on a Friday night. We play our records in it. So I don't know if anyone's got any any opinion on the impact of kind of naming and things like that with the recent change in monarch.
Do you think people might actually have a Queen's head that is hers? But I don't know if they're allowed to. They probably are.
Well, I guess I mean, like there was the chart that I showed. There's lots of different names that have gone in and out of fashion, and I think it was Henry VIII that his behaviour created a lot of Queen's heads, literally, And I think it's some of these are really, really historic. The point has been that people have been trying to modernise the names, and then realising that people like the old traditional names more, and so that they have actually gone back into kind of giving the names of the original pubs back, rather than trying to, Flea and Firkin and all that sort of stuff was always sort of a bit of a nonsense. So yeah, we'll see. We'll do an analysis in a couple of years' time, see if there's any more Queen's heads or King's Arms.
So you don't see any point in the future the Crown becoming just CRWN with a big dot at the end of it? In following,
I don't think you'll rebrand it to that.
Oh.
It is an issue for like our local pub, the Crown, because it's such a common name. When you search the Crown, all you get is the TV series, so you can sort of see why people might try and be more unique about it. But I think the Crown's quite a good name for a pub in reality. And then, so the final thing that I also do is I'm going to do a little bit of band news. So I've got some records. I've got a record. So that was brand news, and I always talk about records. So I'm going to leave you with this. I don't know if anyone is familiar with John Cooper Clarke.
Yes.
So I bought this recently, and it's great. It's called Snap, Crackle and Bop, and there's a cover. And if you've had your copy for a long, this was released in 1980, by the way, and it comes with a little book of poetry. So those that don't know, John Cooper Clarke is a punk poet. Sort of, I think he might have supported the Sex Pistols in the 70s and got famous on the Manchester music scene for doing that sort of thing. And it's great. It's a great album. I only bought it recently. Unfortunately, it was very expensive because it still had the booklet in it. But there's a couple of tracks that you may know. There's one called Evidently Chicken Town, which I think was featured on the soundtrack to The Sopranos. It might have been on the last episode. So I'm going to put the link in. It's very worth checking out. But at the moment, you see, I do my vinyl night that I just showed you the picture of in the Crown. I play this record, but I also then follow it with this record by a band called Working Men's Club, which are a sort of a more modern band from the north, and they're sort of more electronic. Think of sort of New Order, techno, electronic-y type thing. And they've got a song called John Cooper Clarke, which is a real kind of banging track that you'll kind of all enjoy. And I think what I've enjoyed is that there's few artists recently that have been sort of, use that term, leaning into poetry and vocal stuff to actually make their records sound better with all the music that's going on. And I very much would recommend both of those records to you. I don't know if anyone's got another music recommendation, but I'm just going to copy those links into the post. Let me just do that. 2 seconds. Anyone else big fan of John Cooper Clarke?
Yeah. Quite like him. I wouldn't say. I mean, I don't know a huge amount of his stuff, but I certainly quite like hearing him.
He's quite an interesting character, isn't he?
Yeah, he's good. He's good value for he was talking about opening. There's this music venue in Manchester that's been refurbished and reopened, and they were interviewing him about him sort of being one of the opening acts that's going to perform there. And the journalist said, "So have you been like opened many venues?" He goes, "No, I've closed a few though." That was his sort of
Yeah.
ending joke. So, has anyone, if anyone's got any more questions about branding or just conversation, then shout up. Oh, the music's come on. There
Sorry.
you go. You get a bit of John Cooper Clarke live and direct. That's actually Working Men's Club song. John Cooper Clarke playing. Thank you.
That was
Thank you for
completely
that.
unintentional. Sorry.
No, I'm just pleased that you're listening to the tune. So, if anyone's got anything to add, please.
May I ask? May I ask? As I
Yep.
say, I'm taking advantage of you.
Yep.
Supposing I rebranded myself, and it is just me, writing,
Yep.
training, and consultancy. Not
Writing,
editorial.
I think. Yeah, so I think in terms of if you're trying to get people clear about what it is that you do, and also thinking about what people may be looking for. I don't think people are particularly looking for editors, but they are looking for writers. And I would say that, yeah, if you were saying that I do write, I train people to write better, and I do writing as a consulting offer, I think writing is probably better for that, because editorial, which is probably a more traditional kind of word that people in the industry would use, might be a bit more confusing. So yeah, I'd go with writing.
Who's your target audience, Susanna?
Well, thank you, Sam. This is the trouble. Basically, I work for anybody. And this has been my all this business about finding a niche market. I really, I was a journalist. I was a hack. And one of the joys of being a journalist, it was, having to write about anything and everything.
So are you, because I mean, there are just so many different types of writing. It's not that I'm sort of disagreeing with that as an approach. It's just, there's copy editing, and then there's editorial in the sense of sort of magazines and newspapers and journalisms and in-house titles and stuff. And so what's your main area of focus? Or
websites? It's really websites, web copy, planning websites, organizing information.
Yeah, so it's copy editing, really, isn't it? It's kind of it's copywriting.
I have already put copywriting, having resisted it for ages. I've put copywriting and editing onto my website because yes, I think that's what people are looking for.
Copyright, that is the term, isn't it? Copywriting that people use. Yeah.
Do you think if you use this more simplified, if you just said writer, that because it's very much you, and you are a writer, that would, because you want to attract people not necessarily familiar with the kind of terminology, but everyone knows what a writer is.
Yeah.
So maybe people might be drawn to the fact that you're obviously a creative, and if you can supplement that with some, back it up with some real world examples of how you've brought your creative writing to rather than novels and that kind of thing, but a very practical use of your creative skills. It may be that the writer title draws people in initially, and then as long as you're quick enough to get in there with a secondary kind of supporting information that says, well, I'll use that creativity and turn it to your, to the best results for what you're doing rather than for your own creative ends. I don't. It's tricky.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, no, but it's just have to think it through.
Yeah. So have you got a website at the moment?
Yes, I have had a website. Yeah, I've had a website for years.
And do you get many people through?
No, that is exactly. I mean, I refer people to it, but no, I don't get work directly from it. I have to be honest, and that is partly why I want to kind of, refine the message, if you like, but who I am, what I do.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the advice there and the help for Susanna. I think, I think I would probably stick with. I think you could have copywriter, and maybe then lose the word consultancy. You may not need to always say that you do training as well, because that comes further into the journey. But yeah, the fewer words you can do it. I would also try and think of something that's more unique, because the copyright or writing is just very descriptive, whereas if I try and tell people in a nutshell what I do, brand consultant, yes, but what I actually do is try and make branding, trying to make it more inspiring. So make strategy more inspiring is kind of what I'm always trying to do. That's the heart of what I'm always trying to achieve. So having something like that would then actually make people understand more about what kind of copywriter you are would help them engage, and you'd use that on your website when they land on it, etc. So
I mean, I can understand though why, you know, you might want to go for, you know, copy and content consultancy. I can understand that, because just looking at your website, you do offer strategy as well, and that's quite valuable, isn't it? So it's not just copywriting or copywriting training.
That's the thing. That's partly why I resisted the idea of copywriting, because I'd much rather be helping people plan their content,
I can
organize their information. Well, yeah, that's what I'd like to promote.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from.
Well, hopefully some ideas there to help you as well. So, well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you very much, Sam, for popping in. I know you've come all the way from Bristol today. If you're over there, normally you're in the south of France or somewhere like Thailand, but today it's all the way from Bristol. Thank you for being a guest. I'll definitely see you soon. The next one of these is on the 25th of October. I'll send around a replay, and look forward to seeing you all there. If you've got any questions, please shout up in between times.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, and enjoy Working Men's Club and John Cooper Clarke. And a preview from Paul.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Bye.